Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trzeciak,
and me, Aideen Ruttledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland. So we are doing a little sneaky 7th episode of season 4 of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We kind of snuck this in at the end, and the reason that we snuck in an extra episode is because, very sadly for me, Aideen has got a bit of an announcement to make. Aideen, tell us your news.
I am officially hanging up my podcast boots now at the end of season 4. This is just coming at a perfect time for the Irish OT podcast to maybe develop a little bit further, have fresh new ideas. But also I feel that I definitely have got so much out of the podcast and I need to hand over the reins to someone else, which we'll go into detail in a little bit later. This is our 37th episode. So whenever we embarked on this, I never in my wildest dreams imagined that we would record that volume of episodes and have that much content to put out into the Irish OT field. So I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved, Jen, together. We started this off, I think our idea for it came 2 years ago. It was in January. I remember being in a school car park, having a phone call with you, and we decided to get going on it. And here we are now. I suppose we've learned loads as we've progressed through the Irish OT podcast. Our first 2 seasons were very ambitious. We had 12 episodes in each season. They were very varied, covered lots and lots of different areas. We basically just brainstormed all of the OTs that we wanted to speak with in more detail. We didn't really have a theme. And then we evolved a little bit. Season 3, we focused mainly on children. I really particularly enjoyed that season. And then this season, I suppose is more your area of interest, Jen, is young people and young adults. So I feel like it's grown so much and we've brought it along so far. We're a bit more manageable now in that we only have 6 episodes per season. I think that was really important. Quality over quantity.
We start off, it's funny, when we started we thought maybe we'd get 6 episodes if we were lucky, and start contacting people, and it's fair to say everybody has been so receptive and open and supportive. So nearly everybody we've contacted to get involved has agreed to get involved and has been so generous in sharing their knowledge and their time, their experiences, their information. But I remember that conversation when we started kind of thinking about doing the podcast together and kind of looking at our why and why did we think that this would be important. And we both still like podcasts, and we both kind of felt that there was maybe a little bit of a lack of an Irish voice in this area. And, I think it's definitely growing. But in terms of promoting occupational therapy, that's what we wanted to do, highlight the breadth and the depth of our profession. Where are we with that, Aideen? What is helping or not helping? What do we need to do?
I think it's really difficult to define what OT is, and that's what was one of our primary reasons for starting this, to raise the profile of occupational therapy in Ireland. It's really difficult to do that whenever occupational therapy is such a wide area. No 2 OTs are the same. You as a mental health OT and me as a children's OT, our days look so different. We've always said this, haven't we? And even if we look at all of the different occupational therapists that we've had on the podcast over the 37 episodes, everyone's role is so different. That's what makes it's both a blessing and a curse, because if you go into an area of occupational therapy that you're not quite passionate about, there's always so many other options and things to explore further. But also then that leaves it difficult for the public to understand what our role is and how we could benefit people's lives.
And we've seen a lot of the OTs that we've had on the podcast doing an amazing job in the social media sphere in terms of sharing information publicly and kind of showing their work rather than telling about their work. What have you noticed in terms of how OTs in Ireland and across the board are promoting and sharing what they do?
I think just being a little bit more generous, and again, we're such a practical profession. I think that's what social media, there's so many fantastic OT accounts now on social media, but that marries in so well with what we do. As in, you say, they're getting that platform to actually show little video clips. And that's really helped our profession. That's really helped people understand what we can do to enhance people's lives. I think for both of us, it was really important. We were both members of AOTI. That's how we met. What we really wanted to do when we embarked on this journey of the Irish OT podcast was to give back to our profession. I suppose this has all been totally voluntary. This is all our own time that we've dedicated to this podcast. And it's not just the time involved in meeting with people online and recording. We edit, and there's so much work goes in the background into the social media side of things and promoting it. But that's been something that we signed up to from the beginning because we wanted to give back to our profession. We wanted to raise the profile and to really promote what we do.
Absolutely. It's one of the really important things that we all want to do. You know, we give back in terms of training for students, in terms of involvement with our professional body, the AOTI, and I guess for us this was a nice way to do it and to meet some really lovely people as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose from an occupational therapy perspective, and we'll talk about other professions and parents later maybe, but from an OT perspective, CPD and staying on top of learning and kind of finding out about research and that, you know, that approach is really, really key. And I find podcasts to be a helpful way of doing that. Do you feel being involved in this podcast has contributed to your own CPD in any way, and how?
Absolutely. It's been like, it's nearly like setting a menu for yourself. Who do I want to learn from? Who do I want to spend time with? When would we ever get an opportunity to just approach someone that you admire, either online or that you've met at a conference, and invite them onto the podcast to speak for 40 minutes and to really get in to the nitty gritty about what they do, get nosy about what their favorite approaches are, what their favorite CPD options are. It's been, I suppose, the first time in years that I've really, really loved and enjoyed and been so proud to be an OT. And that's what this podcast has given me. It's that opportunity to really, be proud and feel connected to other OTs and share ideas.
Has there been any kind of one or two things that you've incorporated into your practice, or anything that anybody said that really kind of resounded or resonated with you that you've held on to?
I think over the last, actually over every series, we've always had some representation from occupational therapists that are neurodivergent themselves, and that's been really, really insightful. So even just that lived experience, there's so many occupational therapists now that are very generous in sharing what their lived experience has been with being autistic, having ADHD, other differences in how they process information. That's been a real eye-opener. Also just that insight into that lived experience, that other angle, that some of us as occupational therapists are really focused on research and evidence-based practice, but that other avenue of looking at things from the lens of that lived experience has been brilliant, because it just gives that other broader perspective, doesn't it?
Really qualitative information that
Yeah.
can just give a little bit of insight that we might not. And I suppose even in our professional practice, while we try and understand things from the client's perspective, sometimes the interview format where it's more of a kind of a chat, it's there's no assessment, it's just having a conversation, and that's been a nice way just to kind of understand things a little bit differently.
Yeah. It's also been, the podcast has been really important to me. When we started it, I was embarking into private practice. So I was leaving a public sector job. The podcast has given me a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and being able to, I know this sounds cheesy, but being able to network was really important at the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
starting into private practice, to make connections with people. And so that original reason for starting this up, like that was one of the reasons, was again to have that
That
sense of
connection.
community. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I might have said this before, but when I moved from the UK into Ireland, found it difficult to kind of find that sense of community in the world of OT. I didn't know where to look. The AOTI is part of it, but that was a little bit challenging at times. But there is a really strong community of OTs in Ireland. And, I've been in the position, both in the UK as well, where I've kind of felt quite isolated in my role. Maybe I'm the only OT on a team, or maybe I'm working in an environment where OT isn't fully kind of understood or valued in the way that I would hope. So we're kind of forging a path in terms of new areas of work. And that is absolutely exhausting and demanding and very worthwhile, but is not always easy. So finding your tribe, finding your people, and kind of finding ways to connect in with the OT community in Ireland, because it is there, I think is really, really important. And I kind of feel a little bit that we've started to do this around the podcast. We have, as you said, we've done 36 episodes before this, so that's more than 36 people that we've kind of talked to, many of them, the majority of them, being occupational therapists. And we've had, through our social media and through different channels, we've had so much kind of feedback and people connecting in and linking in with the podcast. So hopefully creating, if you're an OT out there who's feeling a little bit lost, do connect in with us through the Instagram page, or through any YouTube, any of the kind of channels that we're on. Leave us a comment on the podcast platform, because you're not on your own, and for parents or people who are looking to access OT, there are ways to do that, so do link in. I think that sense of community is really key.
Yeah, and the thing that I've noticed, like, there is no exceptions to this, Jen. Every OT that we've had and every professional that we've had has been so supportive. Everyone cheerleading each other on. There's been no kind of own agendas or anything like that. It's just really, again, made me so proud to be an OT, because we have established this community of supporting each other, and I suppose redirecting each other to different things that might benefit each other's practice,
Yeah.
the sharing of ideas, the generosity of time as well.
Yeah. So it's all really good, Aideen. So why are you leaving?
Okay, yeah. So I think when we started this out, I saw it as a hobby. I've really, really enjoyed all of the episodes. I suppose I feel like I've spoken to nearly everybody that I've wanted to speak to at this point. There's always more, of course. I suppose going into private practice, I wanted more of a work-life balance. I had a good break off over Christmas. I took 3 weeks off over Christmas, which was just fab. And it made me kind of reevaluate and just think to myself, I need a little bit more time. Things are getting quite busy in private practice. I suppose, as I said, we've done 36 episodes now at this point. It just felt like creatively I needed to hand over the reins to someone else with fresher ideas, new ideas. And as I said earlier on too, like there is so much work involved in the podcast behind the scenes, that I feel like I need to just free up a little bit more time for my own two little kids as
I
well.
am so delighted that you have the courage to do what you need. And we've spoken to people on the podcast about that work-life balance and how do you achieve it and how do you prioritize, and not honoring your own needs, not being a slave to or stuck in a box that you have found yourself in. So I think it's really important to kind of take that step back and say, actually, this has been really positive, but it takes up space, and maybe I need that space for something else right now.
Exactly.
I hope that you aren't going to disappear forever. And I think what's really important is the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast is not disappearing. It is going to continue. We've got a whole Trello board of gazillions of ideas of different areas that we want to cover, different people that we want to talk to. We have started very much in our own kind of personal spheres of work, but we're so conscious that OT is such a vast profession. There's loads of areas in terms of physical health, in terms of business development, and vocational. There's a whole range of different people that we could potentially talk to. So you are taking a step back, but you're also handing on the baton. Tell us, who are you going to hand the baton on to?
I'm handing the baton on to a very, very well-known occupational therapist in Ireland who is going to do an amazing job, who is very much aligned already with Jen. I'm sure people know who I'm talking about at this point. I'm handing the baton over to Aine O'Dea. And I know she's going to do an amazing job. I'm going to be watching on with pride and admiration, cheerleading Jen and Áine on. You just touched on something there, Jen, about OT. We have not got round to speaking to OTs and professionals from the, I suppose, adult physical side. There's loads and loads of more areas. And that was another thing that was important to me too, was to be true to my own passions. I feel like we've covered topics that I'm inherently interested in myself. So I feel like bringing that passion and that interest needs to come from other people, and Áine's going to do an amazing job at leading that with you.
Brilliant. I'm going to talk to Áine now in a second and find out how she's looking forward to stepping into your shoes, if that's even possible. I just want to say personally for me, Aideen, thank you so much for stepping into this new venture with me. I wouldn't have had the bravery to put my head above the parapet and to step out into other people's judgment and other people's kind of thoughts, and it takes a lot to put something out into the ether and hope that it's helpful. And I think we've held each other's hands. You've certainly held mine and pulled me through, and I don't think I could have done it without you. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done with the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast and for the Irish Occupational Therapy community in Ireland to date.
Oh, Jen, thank you. It's been my pleasure. You touched on something there about putting ourselves out there and how daunting that was. That first season, I remember really over-analysing it and going back over and over-editing. I was so scared, but you really helped me and gave me confidence to just go with it. And it's just been all really, I suppose, character building, confidence building. But one of the things too, if anyone's been a guest in our podcast, we said about an essential component is having a cup of tea or coffee in hand. And you and I always met up a few minutes before, caught up with each other, had our little coffee or tea and caught up in life. And I'm going to miss that.
I am here with Aideen's two children, Daniel and Jessica, who just wanted to pop on and tell us a little bit about what they think about their mom doing a podcast. Daniel, what have you thought about your mom being on a podcast?
She should talk about football a lot.
She should talk about football more. I'm with you. There's very little mention of football in the podcast. Jessica, what do you think about your mom doing the podcast?
She does a good job.
She does a good job. What's good about it?
She has some of the fun work toys.
She's some good work toys. That's the great thing about having a mom as an OT, isn't it? Lots of toys. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. So that was Aideen and her kids saying goodbye, and so excited, as Aideen said, to introduce Dr. Áine O'Dea as co-host going forward of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. AwwnYa, thank you so much for jumping into the breach.
I actually feel so privileged to be invited, Jen. So for me, I genuinely feel really privileged to be able to, join you in this journey, and I'm really excited. I kind of can't believe that the opportunity has arisen. So I'm really thankful to Aideen, because I know how much work you've put into setting this up and establishing it. So thank you for having me and welcoming me on board.
And I know Aideen, as she said, is so happy to have somebody who is willing to take on the mantle. And actually, you were the first person we thought of, AwwnYa, because you did an episode with us about dyspraxia. And actually, it was our host listen to episode of the whole 4 seasons we've done so far. So what you said absolutely resonated with people. I know you've been listening as well. And you have lots of ideas kind of for the future of the podcast. And you said, it is exciting to do it. What are your hopes for the podcast going forward? Where do you think we can go? What are you looking forward to?
Oh, after listening to the last season and being so excited hearing to such incredible episodes from Sorika and Hannah and so many others that were on it, and Michelle, for me, it really is to continue that piece of actually to spread the word of actually the real true value of OT and the power of it. And maybe looking at that piece of also widening and spreading our wings a little bit, that actually we're talking to others as well outside the OT profession. That yes, of course, we want OTs listening to our podcast, but also bringing in more of our language into other professional areas. So for me, that's probably one of the pieces of maybe just not necessarily selling isn't the right word, but actually marketing it ourselves a little bit more as to how amazing occupational therapy is and the value that we add when we're working with others, be that psychologists, physios, psychotherapists, teachers, any profession, but actually how we bring so much to the table when we're there.
And we've kind of looked over the third series. We kind of focused maybe on earlier developmental stages, and then last season we were looking a little bit at kind of teenagers, and we've had a lot of neurodivergent OTs on, which has been fantastic. In terms of your areas of interest, what areas would you like to see us covering?
I think probably one of the things that maybe aligning that piece of, I said, of spreading the awareness of OT, maybe that piece more around population level health and looking at what are the areas of dynamic practice where people are really working outside the scope of what was originally classified as an OT job or role, or having conversations with people where we actually show maybe how OT could align in there. So I suppose because I work with a lot of different people now, sometimes I meet people, so recently I was working with a singer, and actually my OT skills still are what I use on a day-to-day basis when I'm working with people in supervision and coaching. So actually for me, maybe that piece of how we apply our occupational lens and perspective to other areas, and maybe just widening that narrative too of looking at it in just those really diverse areas of everything from neuroscience to singing to, and I think when I listen to the Irish OT podcast, I think you've actually done a lot of that already too. So I think where I align in, I think it really follows on from and merges with a lot of what you and Aideen have done already.
And I'm so sorry, AwwnYa, I just jumped you straight in there without actually thinking people don't know you necessarily. And I should have given you the opportunity actually to share a little bit about yourself and your background and the work that you do, which is, really mixed and really interesting. Tell us a little bit about yourself, AwwnYa.
Don't worry, Jen. I think it's because we know each other so well at this stage. We sometimes forget that. But so what's what I do? I'm obviously an occupational therapist by background. I have a PhD from the Health Research Board in population health and health services research. So very broad. So my PhD was looking at the best practices of intervention to improve participation outcomes for children and young people with dyspraxia or developmental coordination disorder. So within my PhD, because it was under the lens of population health and health services research, I would have covered a lot around health economics, health policy, and other areas as well. So I think that really broadened people that I met and what I do. Some of my background is that I'm a clinical supervisor and I have a postgraduate in that. And I also am a qualified and accredited coach with a postgraduate from Business Smurfit School. So I suppose I actually merge all three pieces together now, and I provide supervision services for allied health professionals, and I also provide coaching services, yes, for health professionals, but also people outside the health sector. And I still provide training courses and do talks and deliver around topics on child development and health and wellbeing, predominantly around dyspraxia, ADHD, executive functioning skills, emotional regulation. So really combining research with practical and clinical knowledge and bringing that to different audiences. So that's a little bit in a nutshell as to me and my diverse career. But I think like so many OTs, we love change. And I think change has always been a part of what I've done.
Pushing boundaries, trying new fields, and getting into different areas. And through your work, Áine, I know you're connected with lots of different industries and lots of different OTs in different areas in Ireland. So we'll definitely be leveraging your phone book to get some guests on board over the next few seasons. Thank you so much for stepping into the breach on behalf of Aideen and myself. We're really, really excited to see what the next season of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast brings. So we'll be recording over the next while, and we look forward to showcasing a new season. For anybody who is not following us on their preferred platform, just click follow and then you'll get an update as and when the next season is released. We're also on Instagram, so if you are following us on Instagram, you'll get a little notification when the next season drops. And if you're not following us, get on there and follow us. And as always, if you want to leave us any feedback, connect in any way, if you've got any questions for AwwnYa, if you've got any things that you would like to see with the podcast going forward, you can contact us via email, which is in the show notes, or you can contact us on your social media platform or on Instagram. We'd be delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Jen.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trzeciak.
And myself, Aideen Ruttledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.